We're talking about tune in, hearing the Spirit's voice in a noisy world. And today's the third week. We've only got 2 more weeks. We're going to finish on the first Sunday of February. Then we're going to start something else. But we've been talking for the last 2 weeks about how to really tune in to hear the voice of God or be led by the Spirit in the world in which we live. And so today I want to talk to you about the inner witness. I want to talk to you. Last week we talked about static killers, things that, kind of drown out the voice of God if you allow them to. The first week we talked about the signal is strong. There's nothing wrong with the signal. The signal's coming from God. The signal is coming from the throne room of heaven. There's nothing wrong with the signal. There's something wrong with the tuner. Either we're not tuned in, we're not listening. Something, as we talked about last week, is blocking the signal. Well, there's never been more noise in the world or in history than there is right now. I mean, and I can say that. This morning when I was kind of reading over my notes, I thought, is that one of those preacher statements? It's just this big blanket and it sounds really big, but that's true. Here we are going into 2026, and honestly, there's more noise than there ever has been in my 60 years of life. I mean, and there's always been some type of noise, radio and television going on. But now with the internet and apps and cell phones and earpods or earbuds or whatever they call those things. I still use headphones. I like the headsets. I put the big, headset on with a cord even. I like to plug in when I'm recording. There's just something about plugging into that console and listening to it come straight out of that board. But there's never been more noise than today. And we've been talking about that. There's always a voice telling you what to do. Oh, especially if you tell them you're going to do something for the Lord, if you're, a dream in your heart, there's always somebody ready to tell you what to do. I say it like this. It's somebody that wants to tell me what time it is, but they want to use my watch. It's amazing when we started to pioneer this church, how many people wanted to tell me how to plant a church. They had never, not only planted, they'd never pastored a church, but they wanted to give me insert their voice on how to get it done. Well, thank God my pastor and other spiritual mentors in my life had taught me how to tune in. Doesn't mean I don't miss it. Doesn't mean that sometimes I get some static in there and I miss a step. But I know that I know the voice of God. And it's good because there's always voices telling you what to do. There's always opinions telling you who you should be. Remember I told you last week, that is such a great theological thing. You should write it on the flyleaf of your Bible. I'm going to tell you again in case you weren't here, you forgot, I didn't write it down. This is such a strong theological point. You need to write this down. Opinions, this is it. This is the theological armpit right there. Opinions, minutes, 2 minutes, and you're like, I better get this. If I don't get this right now, Etsy's going to close down and I'll never be able to order this again in my life. Well, it's almost like Mission Impossible. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds. Well, what is that? They're pressuring you. They're pressuring you. They're pressuring you. Hurry, perform, decide, react. It's pressure. Well, in all that noise, it's easy to begin to wonder, is God still speaking? And may I tell you, not just as your pastor for the morning, whether you're part of Christ Church, you're worshiping for the first time, or you're just watching online, just tuned in, but may I tell you as a pastor, a preacher of the gospel, and as a child of God, it is a resounding yes. God is still speaking today. He is still moving upon hearts of people. He is still impressing upon our hearts. He is still leading us. But here's the key. God doesn't usually shout. In my almost 43 years of ministry, almost 45 years of serving the Lord, very seldom has God ever shouted, "Go into the ministry, preach the gospel." Maybe if he came from a deep Pentecostal background, maybe he would have, but I was Baptist back then, so I don't know. But he didn't shout. When I made a decision to get married to Angela, it wasn't a thunderous voice from heaven. When we went on the road to start Faith Country Music and travel across the United States and Canada, it was always just a whisper. And we'll talk about this some more, and I'll help elaborate it. John Osteen taught us like this. Most often it's just a nudge. It's just this little knowing in your spirit. He simply whispers. God doesn't usually shout, he whispers. But most of the time, that's what we expect. We expect God to speak loudly with thunders and signs and big dramatic entrances. And it rarely happens that way. You know, one of the reasons that we rehearse about how we started as Christ Church, because God has been so good to us and have opened up so many doors of favor to us. And here we are 15 years later in our second building and looking for whatever God has for down the road. And so many great people God has connected us with you, and we're so thankful. But when we started that church, the reason we like to share this is we didn't start with a thunderous applause. When we opened those doors at the Cambria Suites, now it's like, I don't know, it's the Indianapolis International Airport Suites or something. I don't know. It's down on Gateway. They changed their name a lot. Anyway, it was Cambria when we went there. We didn't have 500 people knocking down the door. We didn't have 1,000 people. We didn't even have 100 people. We didn't even have 50 people. We didn't even have 25 people. We had 18 people. That included me, my wife, my son, my daughter. There's 4 out of the 18. Now we're down to 14. Well, that also included my father-in-law, my brother-in-law, my mother-in-law. That's 3. Now that's half the crowd right there. We could have just stayed on Beach Drive. Then we had the Estises. There was another 4. Now we're up to 11. 4 of them were visiting preachers that were never going to come back. They were just there to support the work. That's 15. We reached 3 new people that night on September the 10th. So here's the point I'm trying to make. It would have been easy for us to say, well, that was a flop, wasn't it? As a matter of fact, when I went back that night and we was unloading the equipment into my garage, the old plexiglass pulpit that we had back then, I remember my wife and kids had went in, and Ed and Christy had went back home because they lived next door to us then. And I just remember shutting that garage door and standing there on that pulpit thinking, you know, maybe this is not what we're supposed to do. Maybe I better get myself back in there on that phone and on that email and finish booking 2011, because we were at the end of 2010 and I had started diminishing my bookings for 2011. Maybe I better get back on the phone. Because why? Where's the people? Where's the people? You know, here's the church. Here's the steeple. Open the door and there's the people. That's about how many people I had right there. If I'd have had 8 more fingers, that's my people. But as I went inside, though, guess what? A still small voice said, just stay the course. Just stay the path. Next week, 14 people. Why? Because those 4 preachers, 2 of them was from Robinson, a husband and wife, and 2 was from Effingham. They're not driving back over here every Thursday night, no matter how dynamic of a preacher I am. They're not, and it really wasn't that dynamic, to be honest with you. But here's the thing. Most of the time, here's how God leads. God leads from the inside out. And that's how I stayed the course. Because all those circumstances were saying, shut the doors, give this up, get back out there, do what seemed natural at the time. And at one time, it was God's leading, and it was God's plan, and God blessed it tremendously when I was traveling on the field. But that season was coming to a close, and God was getting me ready for the next season. So I want to talk to you this morning about how God will lead you through the inner witness. How God will lead you through the inner witness. First thing I want you to understand is this. God leads through your spirit. Now, this is not on the screen because, Carl, I didn't have her put it on there. But Proverbs chapter 20, verse 27 is one of my favorite scriptures about being led and how to be led by the Spirit of God. And he says it like this. Proverbs says, for the spirit of man is the candle of the Lord, searching all the inward parts of the belly. You see, God will use your spirit, your reborn spirit, the part that gets born again when you become a Christian. See, when you become a Christian, when you become a follower of Christ, nothing really happens on the outside. You looked just like you did when you came in, much to my chagrin. I thought I was going to be like this great-looking man of God coming out. I looked like the same short, pudgy Mississippi kid with a mullet that I did when I walked in the church, you know? But what happened was something on the inside. Because that's what got born again, was the inner man. And that's what God will begin to speak to. I remember I went back to my house that day, went to the apartment where I lived with my mom, went in there. I'd been staying with my aunt, my grandpa. I went back in that apartment, nothing had changed. They were still fighting, cussing, carrying on like hillbillies do, throwing stuff against the wall. It was like World War III going up those stairs. You could hear it and you could picture it. But I walked in, but now nothing had changed with the circumstance, but something had changed inside the circumstance, me. Even though I had the same clothes on, same hairstyle, same unibrow that I used to have, Terry. I used to have a nice unibrow, and Angela didn't care for that. She said, we need to wax that thing. So I thought a unibrow was in, personally. I thought, who doesn't like a good unibrow? Obviously, she did not. But nothing was changed on the outward, but something on the inside, me, because I had received Christ that morning at that little country church. And I remember walking in clear, just crystal clear as if it was yesterday. And it's been 45 years or more maybe, but at least 45 years ago. Everything, boom, things, and all this, just. And I remember walking in my room, shutting the door, not slamming the door, just closing the door, going over to my sock drawer, because that's where you keep all your valuables. And now we know, so you need to go home and get all your valuables and put them in another drawer. Opened up my sock drawer and pulled out a little Bible that somebody had given me when I was 10 years old. So like 5 years earlier, somebody thought, be a good idea, he's 10, let's give him a Bible. What 10-year-old kid didn't want a Bible? Me. I was wanting a Tonka, whatever. But God knew. Because there it was in my sock drawer, because that's where you keep important stuff. And I took that little red Bible out. It was about this size. And I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, and I made this, and it came out of the new me, not the old me, but already God was doing a new work. And I remember I sat just like this on the edge of the bed, looking almost in this direction, easterly direction. And I said, it will not always be this way. One day I'll be leading the way. One day I'll have a home of my own. It might just be being my basset hound Fluff that got healed of the mange. But it'll be a quiet home. It'll be a peaceful home. It'll be a sanctuary. Now, what happened between Friday afternoon when I went home after school, got my stuff, and went to my grandpa's to spend the weekend with him, and then that Sunday afternoon when I went back home to that whole travesty called a house? What happened? I entered into a relationship with Jesus Christ. And when I did, I was born again. My spirit became new. And now, guess what? I'm tuned into a new frequency. And this new frequency is going to help me look at things differently, act differently, respond differently. You see, God doesn't primarily lead us through circumstances or through emotions or through pressure or through fear or, thank God, other people's opinions. I like that. Amen. Because after 44 years of ministry and 60 years, I'm done with people's opinions. Amen. I'm over it. I'm done. Don't care. Don't need to know. Don't waste your time. Don't spend the money on ink. I don't care. That's just where I'm at. That's just because I've learned to follow the leading of God. Romans chapter 8, verse 16 says, the Spirit Himself will bear witness with our spirits that we are the children of God. One translation says it like this: the Spirit Himself will speak to your spirit because you are a child of God. That's one of the benefits of being a Christian. John chapter 1, verse 12, this is not on the screen. A lot of this is free for y'all today. John 1:12 says, for as many as received Him, to them gave He the right to become the children of God. Well, with that right comes privileges and benefits and blessings, many, many blessings. And one of them is, now my sheep hear my voice and they follow me. When I became a child of God, when you became a Christian, when you became a follower of Christ, you gained access to heaven's frequency that God will speak to you through. And as I've said before, He will lead you through your reborn human spirit. Brother Hagin would say it like this: the Holy Spirit will bear witness with your spirit, not your mind and not your feelings. It'll start in here before it gets here and before it gets out here. But we have to be more in tune with what God is speaking to our inner man, to our heart. See, the inner witness it's not going to be loud. And here's how I've had ministers describe it, and I've experienced too. It may be a knowing. We just had a knowing in about 2009 or early 2010 that it was time to start a church. We had talked about it. We had wrote things down about it. You've heard a lot of these stories. But about early spring of 2010, Angela and I both, I was on the road, she was at home working, taking care of Jace and Abby at the time too. Abby was about a year and a half, 2 years old. We both had a knowing, it's time. We just knew. It was just time to start a church. We didn't know how I was going to start it, didn't know anything about starting a church, but we knew it was time. It might start as just a little nudge, maybe a check, like don't do that, don't do that. I'm not really easy about this. It might be a calm assurance. It might be a holy hesitation. Most of the time I find it's just a quiet confidence. You don't understand it all. It's not dramatic, but it's dependable. It's quiet, but it's unmistakable. It's not based on what somebody else says, but God may use that as a confirmation. For instance, we got this knowing about starting the church, and Angela must have mentioned it to Christy because they lived next door to us on Beach Drive. And one day, Jason and I were outside, and Ed drove up in his truck there, coming from work or something, and I'm sure it was work. He doesn't really have a lot of somethings. It's just mainly work, isn't it, Ed? Not a lot of something you have. But back then, now you got OCW. But back then, it was just work. And he got out with that, and believe it or not, he had a cup of coffee in his hand. Can you believe that? And he walked over to the fence and he says, hey, I hear you're starting a church. And we're still kind of, yeah, this is what God, but we're a little nervous about this. We've never started a church. And I said, yep, I believe God is calling. He said, yeah, Christy told us, said, well, we're going to a particular church. But he said, I told Christy, if you start that church, we'll be the first ones in the door. Now, I didn't start the church because the Estises came over and said, hey, you need to start a church. Now, I've had people, we had a group in Franklin one time when I was on the road, call us, said, hey, we're looking to start a church. Will you come to Franklin? God ain't called me to Franklin. Ain't nothing wrong with Franklin, except that ain't where God's called me to go. Just like that place in Arkansas that I told you about a few weeks ago. Nothing wrong with that church. God's blessings are on it. God didn't call me to Arkansas. I knew God had called me to Plainfield. But here's what happened. After the conversation with Ed, my confidence got a little stronger. Not that I didn't already have a confidence and a knowing, but now I had a confirmation because he said, well, I told Christy, if you start a church, we're going to be the first 4 in the door. And they were. You see, don't wait for open doors, but let the open doors confirm what God's already saying. Let the things that happen around you just to confirm what God's already saying. Here's what I found. If God is leading you, it's going to resonate on the inside before it ever shows up on the outside. It's just going to be part of you. It's going to be something you think about. It's something you meditate on, something you talk about. And we had talked about it to people. We said, we're going to be starting a church. Didn't know where, didn't know when, didn't know how, but we knew this was what we were going to do. How did we know that? Because God had begun to speak through our spirit. Secondly, here's another thing about the inner witness. God speaks through your spirit, but peace will be your umpire. Colossians chapter 3 verse 15 says, and let the peace that comes from Christ rule in your hearts. The word rule in the Greek is basically a word picture of one that would be like an umpire, one that would judge a contest, one that would call you safe or call you out, call you in bounds or call you out of bounds. It's the same picture word we'd use today. They had contests and they had challenges back then. And just like today, they had to have somebody that kind of referee it, sort of umpire it, sort of make sure that for the most part things were fair. And I found that interesting that Paul was inspired by the Holy Spirit to use the same word that would bring that picture of one that would mediate a game or a challenge to their mind. He said, let that peace that only comes from Christ rule in your hearts. Let that peace call the shots. Let the peace of Christ make the calls. If you lose peace, if you don't have that peace, wonderful peace, as the old hymn says, take a step, take a breath, eat a Kit Kat, do something. Do something. If you don't have a peace about it. Tom, Angela, and I, we got called to, in fact, I just sent, did you reach out to those people down in Merrim, Indiana? Good for you. I send OCW 2 or 3 opportunities a week. I'm like, hey, go down here. There was a church in Merrim, Indiana. We were just going down to preach. We get there, they're having a board meeting. This is weird. They don't normally have a board meeting when a guest preacher's here. We get there, and they said, well, now tomorrow night when you get done preaching, we want to vote on you to be our pastor. Well, that's news to me. But, we want to be open. We don't want to say no to us suddenly because, God does suddenly. Well, that night we went back, and they had a little, it was the parsonage, and we were there that night. Angela and I spent the night. I'll tell you, there was no peace. No peace. I'll tell you, it was a nice little church. They had a built-in vacuum system. I ain't never seen no church that had a built. You know what I'm talking about? Fancy houses. One day when I tell y'all I got my built-in vacuum system, you can say he's got a fancy house. Because right now I got a little robot that runs around. But this church had a vacuum system, Randy. I'm not kidding you. Had a thing on the ends of the pews, and you stuck the hose in it, and it went to somewhere in the back. I'm telling you, they were fancy. They were a nice church, but they weren't my church. And we want to do this and we want to do that. They had vision, but it wasn't my vision. They had people. They weren't my people. They had a building, wasn't my building. And here we were just out traveling, doing our thing. Security, stability. Instead of living on offerings from week to week, it would have been an X amount of, whatever every week. But it wasn't our X amount. That's not what God called us to do. Oh, I'm telling you. You ever read in Daniel? Of course, he did it because he did wrong. But Nebuchadnezzar said the king had a bad night. Y'all remember that? You read it today after your nap. Over there, he threw Daniel in the lion's den. He knew not to do it. But he did it. Why? Because of other people's opinions. And it said the king had a bad night. Bad night. He was a goat. He wasn't even the greatest. He was just a goat. He had a bad night, and he couldn't wait to get up the next morning and make it right. Man, that was us that night. I was so restless. I'd get up, and I'd think, well, I got a young bride. This would be a good opportunity, but it wasn't a God opportunity. The next day, place was packed. We had a good service. That night, place was packed again. Old deacon leaned over and said, see this place, how full it is? They came to hear you. Well, good, because this is the last time they're going to hear me. I didn't tell him that. But I knew that already because by then I'd made the decision, because, a lot of times emotions, and there was a little old granny over here. She's, and he got up and they said, well, folks, Brother Mott said, that's what they call you back in those days, Brother Mott. He said, Brother Mott said, he can't allow us to vote on him. God hasn't called. Oh, little old saint of God. She's just a crying. We look like my grandma from Mississippi. I almost changed. I said, wait a minute, little sister. I'm going to let you vote. Come on, let's do it. But you see, I couldn't be moved by that because I would have missed out. First of all, most importantly, they would have missed out on God's best for them. I would have missed out on God's best for me. So it was not all about me. It's about this church. I might look like the best, but I wasn't God's best. You see, but how did I know that? Because I was letting peace call the shots. See, it doesn't mean when the peace of God comes in your heart, it doesn't mean that the direction is going to be any easier. It just means it's going to be right. It wasn't any easier for us to go back out on the road and live on love offerings and not know what you're going to get from week to week and all this thing. It wasn't easy, but there was a peace that was paramount in our life because this is where God has called us. Do you realize that some of the biggest, and I'll make it personal because I don't want to make you think I'm pointing a finger at you. My preacher said, remember, Brother Morris, because they used to say that down south, Brother Morris. Remember, Brother Morris, if you're pointing your finger, you got one finger pointing at Donna, you got three pointing back at you. So I don't ever point my finger at anybody because I got like triple coming back. So I'll say it like this. Some of my biggest mistakes that I've made was not because I didn't pray, but it's because I ignored the loss of peace. It's because I ignored the loss of peace, because I wasn't peaceful about it. This is not where I'm supposed to do. There's an uneasiness here, but I'm going to do it anyway because I know it'll all work out in the end. Some of the biggest mistakes that I've ever made in my life was not because I wasn't praying. It's because I wasn't listening. I told you guys there was a great plaque in Brown County. I'll have to go back down. I'm sure some good husbands bought it by now. It says, in our years of marriage, we've been through a lot. Most of it's been my fault. And I was going to present that to Angela every anniversary, every day of the week. Yesterday we was talking to Abby and we were sharing stories back on the early days of the road, not the one after we left Terre Haute. That was a different era. But the first, and Abby's like, Dad, how could you have put Mom through that? I said, oh, don't you let her kid you. She loved every minute of it. She said, Abby, one time we were in a camper trailer down in the heat of Mississippi in a campground, and we'd have to ride a bicycle to go take a shower. And by the time you took your shower and rode back, you needed another shower because it was so humid down there. You needed another shower. And I'd forgot about this. I only think on the good things, Lee. That's why I think on the good things. She said, and you remember that camper trailer was infested with ants. And Abby's like, Dad! And I'm like, I don't remember that at all. And Abby said, oh yeah, Mr. Positive, silver lining in every cloud, don't remember the ants. I said, I just remember we had a camper. And it wasn't ours, it was a borrowed camper. It was borrowed ants too, because they weren't our ants. But nevertheless, but you see, the Holy Spirit will give you that peace, and that peace will be your umpire. Oftentimes the Spirit's going to say, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't go in that direction. Wait, don't you do that. See, those checks, church, are not restrictions. They're for your protection. Third, let me hurry on here. The inner witness gets stronger with practice. The more you tune in, the easier it is to say, I know that I know that I know. Like nobody will ever tell me that it wasn't God's will for us to start this church 15 years ago. I just know that. I appreciate people saying, I'm so glad you started. Boy, this is a church I love. I appreciate that. It's good confirmation. But even if nobody showed up and I was sitting here by myself, I'm like, well, this is where I'm at, God. I'll just keep preaching to that camera, and whoever shows up, this is what we'll do. Here's what Psalmist said in Psalm 16, verse 7. I will bless the Lord who guides me. Even at night, my heart instructs me. See, where's the instruction come from? In your heart. In your heart. I remember one of the greatest lessons back in the 90s when we were over in Terre Haute, because I knew one day I was going to go on the road. We knew that from the beginning, but I wanted to really be in tune with the Lord. And so I pray simply because I'm a simple man. That's why I always tell Angela, I'm a simple man with simple pleasures. You know what I mean? Man, like I ate Friday night Speedway because I had some stuff that I had to do after biscuits and gravy. I had a slice of pizza and 2 Dunkin' Donuts. Don't tell my trainer that, because I was at a weak moment. He'll make me do 3 more. I was at a weak moment. Matter of fact, I saw your son there. He was a blessing to us too, or to me and to Abby, because Abby wasn't feeling well, so I stopped to get her some drinks, some Sprite and ginger ale. I thought, I just will get me a slice of pizza while I'm here, and get me 2 of these Krispy Kreme donuts and a Diet Dew, because I'm got to cut back, you know. I don't even know what I was going to tell you about that now, but anyhow. It was pretty important, but anyhow. Oh, I know what I was going to tell you. So I'm a simple man. I'm a simple man. I'm just a simple man. I'm a simple man. I think that's a song, isn't it? I don't know it well enough to sing it, though. But anyhow, so when I was in Terre Haute, I would pray, Lord, and this is theologically not right, but it was just my way of expressing. I said, Lord, I want to be so in tune. This is in 96, 97, 98, 99, before Jason was born in 99. Lord, I just want to, because the church was growing, and I knew, man, I got to have God's direct. We went from 40 to almost 250, just like, within a year. And I'm like, man, this is like a 3-year-old running a Fortune 500 company. Everything's great till after milk and cookies comes naps time, and then from there it's downhill. I'm like, I can't do this on my own, God. I got to have your direction. So I would pray this simple prayer. I'd say, Lord, I want to be so in tune to your voice that if you sneeze, I'll say, bless yourself, Lord. And that's exactly how I prayed. Now, God doesn't sneeze because he's healed and he doesn't have any allergies or sicknesses or anything like that. I get it. Don't give me your opinion on that, okay? I was trying to talk to the Lord, okay? I'm not talking to you. But that's how I would pray. Well, one night, we had a radio station there, and one night after Sunday night service, we had some little box of chocolates that we like to give out. Because laughs like a box of chocolates, and we give these little boxes of chocolates out. And so one night after the service, and 100 people or so there milling around, I thought, well, I'm going to go in the radio station, take my headset off, see what they're doing. Well, the guy that ran it in the evening, he'd done gone because it's automated. He done put it on, he was out of there. So I remember I reached up in that cabinet. I got me a little box of chocolates out of there. There's 4 to a box from Fannie Mae, nonetheless. And we had a pop machine in that church, too, which made it a little bit better than us. But we're headed that way. Pop machine. And my favorite at that time was the Mellow Yellow. That was my favorite. And so I went down the hall, got myself a cold pop. I paid 50 cents. Yes, I did. I had a key, but I didn't use it. I like to pay my way. So I popped that 50 cents, got that cold Mellow Yellow. Whoo-wee. Sunday. I was enjoying myself walking back down the hall. I go on the radio station. I thought, well, I'm going to go out and greet a few of the folks, but I'm going to pop me one of these chocolates. I pop me a chocolate. Pop me another chocolate. Well, there's still 3 chocolates because I only popped 1 out of 4. And I start walking out the back door. Now, the front door is locked to the radio station, so only ministry people could get back there. And as I look back and I saw those little things with the chocolates, and I've been praying, Lord, I just want to be in tune. And, and it just came in my heart, those won't be there when you get back. I thought, we got a cabinet full of chocolates. They can get their own chocolate. Plus, nobody's going to be back here. This is only, ministry people, and they're all gone. These chocolates will be there. So I go out and I minister or talk to the folks a little bit. So I go back in later. Everybody's gone, lock the doors. We go back in. I'm like, I'm going to go get my soda and the rest of my chocolates. And Angela said, I'll wait in the office. So I go through, and I see the little paper still there. And I think to myself, now, how silly was that? Here I thought somebody's going to eat. What would make me think somebody's eat those chocolates? Folks, if you're going to eat somebody's Fannie Mae chocolates, take the papers with you, okay? Don't take the chocolate out and put the little papers back. That's just deceiving, one. Now you not only stole, now you've lied about it, all right? True story. I walk back in there. All 3 chocolates are gone. She didn't. She wouldn't have done it. She had her own chocolate. To this day, but here's the thing. I don't know where those chocolates went. I don't know that an angel of God didn't just kind of peel back the curtain and just reach his hand and say, I'm trying to teach this boy to be listening to me. I don't know where those chocolates. As a matter of fact, I told him the next Sunday this story, and I said, listen, I ain't praying that any of you get a whipping from God because you stole my chocolates, but I'm telling you this, I learned to listen because here's what happened. God will use the little nudges to make the big leadings clear. God didn't care about those Fannie Mae chocolates. Heaven knows I didn't need them. I was weighing in about 230 at the time, and I'm like 204 now. So you can imagine another 26 pounds hanging over this chair because that's about where I was at that time. God knows I didn't need them. The church didn't. They got chocolates. I don't know where those chocolates went. But you know what it did? It taught me how to be tuned in to that little prompting, that little nudge, that little push, that little, hey, go down this road. Hey, call that person. Hey, don't say that. I wouldn't say that. You about to write a check you can't cash. Don't say that. Well, give that to that person. Just call that person and say, hey, I got something I want to bless you with. Or maybe just wait just a second. You see, what God is doing is the more we tune in, the witness of the Spirit gets stronger. And when we make small moves, the bigger leadings become even clearer. When you just learn those little small nudges to be obedient. Now, we're going to talk about this in the month of March, but here's what I want you to understand. You don't need perfection. You're going to miss it. See, but I would have never known if I'd ate those chocolates. I'd have never known that those chocolates are going to get missing. So you don't need perfection. You need responsiveness. Fourth and finally, as we close, don't ignore the checks. When the Holy Spirit, when you get that pause in your heart or you get that nudge not to go in a particular direction, like I've told you, most regrets from my life came from not from what I didn't know, but from what I knew inside of me, and I ignored it. That moment when you said, man, I don't feel good about this. Probably shouldn't do this, but I'm going to try it anyway. Hey, y'all, watch this. Is never a good sign. It never ends up good. Something's off. Maybe I just need to kind of slow down here. You see, it's not fear, it's the Spirit of God. The Spirit of God gives us these checks, these knowings in our heart, not to restrict you again, but to protect you. I like what Dr. Norman Vincent Peale says. He said, the more you trust yourself, the more you'll trust God, because he's the one guiding you. We've all had those moments. I mean, we could stop for the next 3 minutes of the remainder of this service. I could say, tell me a time that you just knew in your heart you weren't supposed to do something and you did it and it turned out horribly. I mean, we'd be here, you'd be like wanting to go to lunch, because all of us have had those instances in our life. But when you override that inner witness, confusion follows. But when you honor it, clarity shows up. So I want to close with this. Here's what I want you to understand. Unfortunately, Christianity has done sometimes God a big disservice, and preachers are a number one culprit, of which I am a preacher, but I try not to do this. We have somehow set God up as one that he's got a lot of good things for you. He's got blessings, he's got guidance, he's got leadership, he's got a storehouse of blessing. But it's a big secret on how to get there. It's like a maze, and you just got to kind of figure it out. And if you yell large enough, or if you holler big enough, or if you do something, I don't know what, but if you do something, maybe you'll get God's attention, or maybe if you can figure out the secret, God will speak to you, or God will lead you, or God will pour out his blessings. Folks, let me tell you, God's not trying